I'm Nick. I've been in the Valley since 2006, deploying critical infrastructure and applications, and I'm going to talk to you about evolution of software deployments. Let's define software. Software is a set of instructions the computer has to perform. Software deployments are all the activities that lead up to the software being available for use. Talking about a little historical facts here. Punch cards are usually known as the early use in computers, but actually were invented in 1725. And software theory was attributed to Alan Turing's essay in 1935. Then in the 1960s, software became more than theory, and manufacturers sold hardware with software. This was the first workflow for deployments in our industry. So through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we invented a lot of different packaging, a lot of physical packaging, and we deployed software in many different ways. And at this point, software no longer needs hardware to depend on. It can run almost anywhere. And we see that today still. The original deployment workflow of packaging software on hardware still happens with smartphones, network devices, and vendor-supplied servers. So the first few decades, we've focused on the physical software deployment. Now we're going to focus on more of the virtual software deployments. And that's where DevOps comes into play. We use virtual packaging in deployments, and what do they all have in common? They all have in common an opinionated way to deploy their software. There's no one convention, an API that you can deploy software with all of them. And history shows we have plenty of ways to deploy software. We create new ones. We use the old ones. We don't get rid of any. So DevOps automates all the things, and we deploy all the things. It just happens to be 15 different ways we have to do it. And then we know this, so we have to abstract our deployments. And we have tools in the industry now that try to abstract those deployments for us. Some are great in one thing, and others don't do so good in other spots. Just like software deployments, we also keep creating layers. And each layer, I see, requires a new way to deploy the software for that layer. So the existing tools we have are trying to take on those new layers they're not really designed for. So that's where the problems start. A tool designed for managing virtual machines are actually trying to manage containers. Each layer is different. Each requires a different model. And I don't know if we're going to be able to keep up with that model. So I recommend for a new layer, a bleeding edge layer, that you don't invest too heavily into the deployment method or tool sets that come out yet. Understand what the business value is for that layer and see if it's justified. And this is the one that I get hard. It's hard to say. So they say change is the only constant in technology. A more accurate statement is the only constant in technology is the addition of more technology. So we're in a unique position to know all that. Then we hear things like, "Hey, can we have that new thing in production?" Well, let's not say no right away, but we're gonna have to take a deep breath and say, "Hey, where's the business value in that?" And maybe there is. So what's the future look like? Technology that has new buildings that are falling over, and everything in between. I've seen this in small startups and large enterprises and everything in between. So let's build APIs that limit the patterns we support and reduce the amount of tests we have to write because we're limiting the amount of things we have to support, and then create conventions and proper tools to deploy per layer. Separating the layers allows us to measure business needs and see what the success is for each layer. So, for example, one layer we have to patch every quarter, another layer we may have to deploy a new feature. And bugs fixes every hour. And DevOps is the glue that builds the orchestration. And so we have these pipelines that we can create APIs between the layers, and we can use those pipelines as self-sufficient workflows. And our past, present, and future have always been the same. We've just now have a virtual pipeline that we make software available for use. Thank you.